Hello, welcome to our next section of notes in Unit 2. Today we're going to talk about the crossing, or what's commonly referred to as Washington crossing the Delaware and attacking the Hessians at Trenton. So we're talking about a really rough time at the beginning of the war for Washington. We've talked about how they haven't won any battles, they've been defeated by the British, they've been chased by the British throughout many parts of the colonies. They've had major losses in New York, and as we watch the beginning of the movie The Crossing, the British have chased them across the Delaware River onto the Pennsylvania side. So many people, including some people actually in Continental Congress, have been questioning Washington's ability to lead the army. He's literally had his army chased and tried to avoid the British. A lot of people are wondering whether or not he's afraid to fight or he doesn't want to fight. We've talked a little bit about strategy and about how that is probably the best strategy Washington can have at this time, but some people see this as a definite sign of weakness. Another thing that's happening to Washington at the end of 1776 is that a lot of his men are going to be up for a big decision. They can decide to re-enlist for another year of service, or they can decide to go home. So all of these things are happening in late 1776. Things are not going well. Technically at the end of the year on December 31st, the enlistments are up. Washington needs to do something to convince his army to stay and also to motivate them and give them some type of hope that they could possibly win this war. So Washington decides to make a very bold move. In fact, this is a move that even some of his closest advisors thought he was a little crazy to try. So this is the plan that Washington devises. He wants to cross the Delaware River from Pennsylvania into New Jersey. He wants to do this at night. He wants to create a surprise attack on the Hessians, which are stationed inside the city of Trenton. He has about 2,400 soldiers. The Hessians are about 1,500. Now, of course, the Hessians have, blankets and food and ammunition and, all these things that Washington's army does not have. Washington wants to do all this in secret, surprise attack, hopefully still in darkness, and catch them at the ultimate time of surprise. So as we look at this map, this is where Washington's troops are at. They're on the Pennsylvania side of the Delaware. They're going to cross the river here in the middle of the night, back and forth, back and forth. They don't have enough boats for everybody to get on at the same time, so they're going to go back and forth. They're going to come up here. They're going to march down. We're talking about, kind of like 5, 6, 7 miles or so. They're going to get to this point. They're going to break into two parts, and they're going to then hopefully surprise the Hessians here at Trenton. And here's a picture that I took a couple years ago when I was at Washington Crossing State Park. Gives you a little bit of an idea of how wide the river is at the point that they want to cross. And then all of this is also going to take place at a very optimum time. It's going to happen on the day after Christmas. So they're technically going to cross the river Christmas evening, and then they're going to attack the morning of December 26th. So hopefully the Hessians will be a little bit off guard. Maybe they've been, enjoying Christmas and they've had a big meal, those types of things. Maybe they won't be suspecting it the day after Christmas. Now, something that Washington cannot predict that does happen, that is both a pro and a con to this plan, is that the night of the crossing, when they're crossing the river, there's a driving blizzard. Frigid cold, lots of snow. This is a good thing in some ways. It's going to create a little bit of an element of surprise where the Hessians aren't going to be able to maybe see it as much, or in some ways that they might not think that the Americans are going to be trying to attack in a blizzard. But the blizzard also does cause some casualties for Washington, as some of his men are afflicted with frostbite, and then eventually some of them do die because of exposure to the cold. So here's a rendition of what it might have looked like as they were getting ready to cross. Here's the place at Washington Crossing State Park where they were gathering before the crossing of the Delaware. Here's some examples of the Durham boats. This is at Washington Crossing. They do a reenactment every year, so they have some of the boats there for the reenactment. So these are some people here to give you an idea of size. These are very large boats used for transporting essentially rock or iron ore down to the smelting plants. There's a picture of what it looks like kind of inside the boat, so you can kind of see the size of the boat. So Washington and his men are able to maintain the element of surprise, largely because of the blizzard. When they attack at Trenton, it's actually daylight already because it takes them a lot longer to cross the river than they thought. The Hessians did receive notice from different spies that Washington and his men were on the move, but they did not really believe that someone would attack the day after Christmas and in a blizzard, so they don't really prepare as much as they probably could have. The Americans, amazingly, only have 2 people that are killed, and those are both essentially during the march from exposure, and they only had 5 total people wounded. So pretty amazing, first of all, that they win. Second of all, that the casualties are so low. Here's a couple artist renditions of what it might have looked like in Trenton as the battle's being fought. Colonel Rahl from the Hessians is shot by a sharpshooter and is eventually killed, or he dies because of his wounds there that he suffers at the Battle of Trenton. The Hessians have 22 soldiers killed, 83 wounded, and the amazing part is they have almost 900 Hessians that surrender. So some do escape, but almost 900 Hessians are captured as prisoners of war in the battle. So Washington and his men now get all the supplies the Hessians have, food, ammunition, artillery, all those types of things, along with all of the non-material things. Confidence. They now believe that they could go up against the enemy and win. A lot of these men decide to stick it out and re-enlist for the next segment of the war. Washington then follows up this attack just a couple days later with an attack at Princeton and also wins that battle. So not only do they win the Battle of Trenton, they also win the Battle of Princeton a couple days later and begin to build quite a bit of momentum for this part of the war. There's a map that shows the attack on Princeton here. This is the Delaware, this is Trenton, so gives you a little bit of an idea of kind of where we're at geographically. Couple things from popular culture about the attack on Trenton. This is a famous painting of Washington crossing the Delaware. It is very historically inaccurate. The boat's not the same. It didn't happen during daylight. The flag was actually, this is a flag that's created years later. So there's not as much ice in the river. There's a lot of things in this painting that are not accurate. It is a very famous painting though. It's actually done by somebody in Germany many years after this. But it does appear in many cases in popular culture. Here's an example of the New Jersey quarter when they were able to place something significant about their state's history on the quarter. New Jersey, back in 1999, decided to put the crossing of the Delaware, so that's fairly significant. Here's a couple humorous looks at the crossing, Washington crossing the street, Washington telling his men to put their cell phones on vibrate. This is one that I have by the door in my classroom, one of my personal favorites. Hang on, I gotta tweet this. And then this is a marker at Washington State Crossing Park where you can see where they crossed the Delaware River. So very critical time period for the Americans. Washington is able to win the Battle of Trenton and keep a lot of his men and also gain quite a bit of motivation and then also momentum in the war. So that is our notes on the crossing. Thanks, guys.